Hi guys, I am going to try to show you the basics of posting a blog post on WordPress, and I'm going to break it down into three different parts. I'm aware that some of you haven't used WordPress before and I don't want to overcomplicate it all in one go, so I'm going to start off just with the basics of logging in and posting some content. So I'm going to log in with Brittany's account here, which is an author account. If you had an admin account, there would be more buttons to press down here. This way is actually a little bit simpler. Now, this is the dashboard that you get when you log in. The good news is that all of this, at a glance, activity, quick draft, you can ignore it. You don't need any of this. All you need if you want to post or create a post is this button here, and you can either add a new post by pressing here, or you can click posts, which will open up a screen showing you all of the posts that have either been scheduled here or published, and you can add a new here or here. It doesn't matter, but let's do that. We're going to create a new post, so add new. This will open up the template for creating a new post. And again, it may look at first glance slightly confusing. There's quite a lot going on the screen, but you don't need to worry about it. You can ignore all these buttons here. All you need is this section here, and this is basically very similar to a Word document, Microsoft Word. Now, when you open up a new post, it should open up in this tab here, Visual, which is as close to what you might be used to as possible. You can edit in text if you want, and you can also edit with Page Builder, but I recommend you to stick with Visual for now, and if we want, we can progress on to the text tab later. This is the most like a Word document. So we're going to create a title for our post here, and just to give you a bit of a steer on how to pick a title, if you're writing for a blog that already exists, you can go across here to categories, and you can see there are 5 different categories on this blog that you can post in. One is dive reports. So if you've done a dive recently, perhaps, then you would report about it here. If you had some tips or some training to offer other divers, you probably create a post and put it in here. If you had a more general post about sea life or some conservation or education, then you would pick this one. If you were a diving instructor and you had just certified some new divers and you wanted to give some details about them and how well they did in their courses, you'd put them in here. And anything else, news, activities, perhaps activities for non-divers, would go in here. There's some disagreement about categories, but I think the safest and the best bet is only to use one category per post. You might write something that you consider a dive report and news, but if that happens, then just pick whichever category you think is most fitting. Okay, so we're going to create a new post, and then we're going to save it as a draft using this button here. So I'm going to pick my recent dive in Indonesia, and that is the title. That is otherwise called an H1 tag. Now if I open this up here, you see there are different types of text that I can use. There is heading 1, heading 2, all the way down to 6, and then we'll ignore pre-formatted, but we also have paragraph. Paragraph is the default, and that's what we'll write in. But this is essentially your H1 tag. It's the title of your post. So I recently did a very nice dive in, let's say, Pulau Way, Indonesia. Were an abundance of marine life, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so that is essentially it. You are posting just like in a Word document. What is a good thing to keep in mind is not to make your sentences too long. keep it short and snappy. As we'll talk about in a later video that I'm going to make, in terms of SEO and readability, this WordPress interface will give you some tips. You can see here already my readability is okay, it's not good. Now, I don't think you need to worry about that too much at this point. Just write your posts, but the rule of thumb is don't use too complex language and don't be too waffly in your sentences. Keep them nice and short. Something I should show you is that it's a good practice to get into to use subheadings. And you might do this already, but let's say we're going to talk about creatures I saw on my dive. You want to talk about that, so you make that a heading. Now, if you did this in Word, you'd probably just click bold, but it's important when you're using WordPress that you use a heading. And this is because Google, when it's reviewing your content, it looks first and foremost for your titles, for your headings. So it will take a steer on what the article is about by looking at the titles first and then the content second. As you see, just by adding a subtitle here, my readability has gone to good. That's probably a coincidence, but it is good practice. So I saw seahorses and turtles. Okay, and maybe you're going to add another title. Maybe you want to make a subtitle about the turtles I saw. And then just as before, you'd created a subtitle, but because turtles are one of the creatures you saw on your dive, maybe you would make this heading 3. Okay, I don't want to overcomplicate it because it's unlikely you're going to write content that's that long. From a readability point of view, it's recommended that your articles are no shorter than 300 words. I've seen some of the words, some of the posts that have been put out there before, and they've been extremely short, and they're really not worth bothering with. You need to write a decent amount. Between 500 and 1,000 words is probably a good rule of thumb. So I wouldn't worry about too much about heading 3s. You probably want to talk about. You probably just want to stick to one level of subheadings. Maybe you would talk about currents when diving in Indonesia, and instead of a heading 3, we'll make that a heading 2. Lots of currents, blah blah blah. Okay, so that is effectively it. That is how we start our post. We've written what we want to write, and then before we post it, we want to pick a category. So as I've said, my recent dive, that's going to go in dive reports. So I need one category. I'm going to click that category there, and then I'm going to add some tags. Now, we already have a lot of tags in this blog, and you don't want to create too many tags, I think, otherwise it can get a bit messy. But the idea of a tag is that the category is going to say roughly what the article is about. This is a dive report. The title should go into a bit more detail. My dive report, my recent dive in Indonesia. So that's told you a bit more. And then you'd use the tags to say it a little bit more. So maybe you would use, we just talked about turtles, so we'd use some kind of marine life. What have we got here that might do? Maybe we haven't. So we would use. Maybe we would use seahorses. We talked about seahorses, so I can add seahorses. We know that the article's about diving, and it's in Indonesia. Have we got an Indonesia tab? We don't yet, so we'll add one of those as well. Okay, so that is probably all we need to do for this video. So I'm going to save that as a draft and end the video, and I will come back to you again.